Dan, do you want to come up and flip a coin to see who goes first on opening remarks? And then we're going to go back and forth. Oh, okay. You don't want to, like, take a picture of this historic moment?
Where's the third candidate?
All right, we were going to put up an empty chair.
We should have put an empty seat in for
Little NDP sign, cut out like in the baseball games.
John Horgan's face.
I want to.
That would be good.
Okay.
That would be hilarious. So
All
what's
right.
going on?
We were going to flip for who does opening statements.
Okay.
So heads is what? Tails is what?
Well,
whoever calls it.
chooses
So who's
gets
calling?
to choose if they'd like to go first. Oh my God, we have to.
I call heads.
We're going to flip to see who calls it.
Heads, I'll go tails.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I want a tails.
Yeah.
Heads.
Okay, and I'm going to let it hit the floor because I don't have my glasses on to catch it. All right, here we go. Heads for Evening, and thank you for joining us for the 2020 All Candidates Forum in Fort St. John. My name is Cheryl Montgomery, and I'm the Executive Director with the Fort St. John and District Chamber of Commerce. I'll be your moderator this evening. We are joined this evening by our candidates, Dan Davies with the BC Liberal Party and Trevor Bolin with the Conservative Party. We're coming to you live, but social distancing, at the Lido Theatre in Fort St. John. We are observing all strict COVID-19 guidelines. Our candidates are physically distanced, 6 feet apart, and the theater is closed to the public. We are joined by the media who are broadcasting this evening so you can watch our debate. We want to thank our sponsors who have helped us put this evening together, including Brian at the Lido Theatre, Laura, who's here with the media, along with Adam at Moose FM, sorry Adam, Matt with Alaska Highway News, CJDC TV, we've got Austin here, and the Fort St. John Chamber, myself. The BC Real Estate Association is also a proud sponsor of this event. We thank you all for helping this happen. Questions were gathered through the different media outlets previously in the area and have been compiled to create questions for our candidates this evening. The format this evening will follow a guideline which includes a 5-minute opening with each candidate. We flipped a coin and Mr. Bolin won the toss and has asked Mr. Davies to start. Questions will be asked of both candidates afterwards. Answers will be restricted to 3 minutes each, and we will be respectfully enforcing that. No talking over each other. We're going to be polite. We will ask questions first, and they will be answered by each candidate, and then we will follow with questions later from our live feeds and specific to our candidates should we have time left at the end of the evening. We'll conclude this evening with 5-minute closing statements from each candidate. I ask again that the candidates do not interrupt each other, but show respect and patience during the others' answers. Thank you very much for following us. If you have any questions, please go to our live feeds and you can post any questions you'd like to ask later on those feeds. All right, are we ready to get started? Mr. Bolin, Mr. Davies? All right. Let's start now, Mr. Davies, with your 5-minute opening comments.
Thank you, Cheryl. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dan Davies. I'm delighted to be here with each of you tonight. I want to recognize that we are on the traditional territory of the Dene people. I'd like to start by thanking the organizers for putting this on, as this is an important part of the democratic process. Ladies and gentlemen, though, this is an election about who can best deliver results for North Peace families. As the former MLA, city councillor, volunteer, father, educator, industry worker, I feel that I am the best person that is able to do this job with the support of my BC Liberal team. Over my lifetime living here in the North Peace, there isn't an area in this entire riding that I haven't had the opportunity to spend time with the people that work, play, and enjoy their area here. I've come to learn and appreciate an incredible spirit that each of us have, working hard, raising a family, contributing to our communities, wanting to make things better for our next generations, something that I think we all can relate to. Being born and raised here in Fort St. John, I pride myself on this exact spirit. With over 20 years working in the oil and gas sector, as a truck driver, and later as a school teacher, I'm raising my family here with hopes that that my children will not have to leave. I've volunteered thousands of hours in the community in the not-for-profit sector, from restorative justice, working with the Legion, cadets, the SPCA, just to mention a few. That is what drives me and my desire to support this community. That is why I'm running for re-election as the MLA. Years ago, I started volunteering on the Reform Party of Canada, working with Preston Manning, and much of what Preston Manning said and did still resonates well with me here as a candidate in Peace River North. I've then moved on. I actually was a member of the Canadian Alliance, the Conservative Party, also working on Mr. Zimmer's local electoral district, and most recently working on the Aaron O'Toole campaign. Rural and northern BC communities are the backbone of BC. And it's a challenge that we have to do to continually bring this up and to make sure that we are heard in Victoria. I'm proud of many of the debates, questions, statements that I've made in the legislature, all of which I always start with how proud I am to represent this incredibly rich and diverse region. I'm committed to continue to work hard for you and to make sure that we have more good-paying family jobs so our kids and grandkids don't have to leave the region. We continue to be committed to the oil and gas sector as well as the LNG sector as well. In fact, just today, our leader, Andrew Wilkinson, was in Kitimat, and he was announcing his full support on another LNG facility there. There's a future in LNG, and we all know this. We know that the world wants our energy. And British Columbians know how to do resource extraction better than anywhere in the world. I've hosted many pro-resource industry rallies over the years, raising awareness on this important industry. We need, though, to be more competitive. We need to attract more investment dollars into our province. We are committed to streamlining the process in the oil and gas sector and in LNG. Supporting our forest sector is extremely important, which is hurting everywhere across British Columbia, including here. I hosted a roundtable last year with industry representatives, loggers, elected officials, to share ideas and solutions, of which we brought those forward to government, looking at stumpage fees as well as value-added products. The agriculture industry is a stable backbone to our community here in the Peace. Recently, government has been taking the rights away from farmers. Bill 52 and Bill 15 both are attacking farmers and their land ownership, from not allowing them to subdivide a parcel for their children or not allowed to have a secondary business. We are committed to making sure that this legislation is changed. With a strong economy, we will be able to support healthcare. We will be able to support education, K-12 and post-secondary. We need to look after our people. This is the foundation of the BC Liberal Plan, a strong, growing, and diverse economy that creates good-paying jobs for British Columbians and to provide strong communities that we can all call home. Although in opposition these past 3 years, I've had the opportunity to bring forward many local issues to ministers and senior bureaucrats. I've worked tirelessly to represent the region during budget debates, meetings, bills, to ensure issues like the nursing program and the Taylor Bridge remain on the radar, liaising with the Old Fort residents, making sure that their issues are brought forward. I'm proud of the work that I've done these past years. I will be a passionate advocate for the Peace River, keeping our diversity as a strength for all of us.
Thank you, Mr. Davies.
I appreciate everyone being here tonight and look forward to your support. Thank you.
Thank you. That's your 5 minutes. All right, Mr. Bolin.
Thank you. He can have, Dan can borrow 15 seconds of mine since he went a little bit over. My name is Trevor Bolin. I'm the leader of the Conservative Party of British Columbia. I'd like to start off for appreciation of the Denishaw people on their traditional territory, as well as thanking everybody who's come together to put this event on, including yourself, who's dedicated and given up your time tonight to moderate this session. So, and of course, thanks to those that are tuning in live. This is certainly a different format than I think either of us or any of us are used to, but it's a format that we're going to make it work. I've got deep roots in the community. My family's been in this area since 1926. I'm now raising my boys with my wife, who are 5th generation in Fort St. John. I'm proud to be from Peace River North. My boys are proud to be from Peace River North. We don't believe that there's a better area or better municipalities that you could live in, and that's why I've always been passionately involved in the community, whether it's been council now for over 12 years, starting at the age of, I believe I was 28 years old, or getting involved provincially and federally in politics and different groups in the community. A lot has changed, and I think we're going to see even more change coming forward, and that's why last year, when there was a leadership race for the leader of the Conservative Party of British Columbia, I let my name stand. I let my name stand proudly because I truly believe that I can make a difference. I truly believe that I can help form a party and could help form a party that represented people, that didn't worry about party lines, that didn't toe party lines. It literally would listen to every single person's concerns in the communities in Peace River North and Peace River South. And of course, we always say that the North is the backbone. Without us, there is no gas, there is no power, there is no oil. And that's something that we've all become proud of. And now as we look forward to even more hydro as well. I'm also a business owner, aside from being a city councillor, and in the stores that I own and operate that I'm proud of, I employ over 150 people. So I know what it's like to be able to hear from people that have concerns, and whether it's in my stores here or stores in Peace River South, same message, and the same message is being able to ensure that they're heard, being able to ensure that their needs are being met, and that their fears can be dealt with, and that's part of why I got involved. I'm proud of the 19 candidates that I'm running right now under the Conservative banner in British Columbia. I have 19 ridings that are well represented by quality local candidates where they work, they play, they eat, they shop, and they want to have a part in being able to make change and make people's lives better. So with my deep roots in this area, in this community, it allowed me to spend a ton of time in Fort St. John, in the fields in Rose Prairie, on Charlie Lake, on a drilling platform in Fort Nelson and beyond. And all of this is my home, and I know all of this is your home. And it doesn't matter if you're in Charlie Lake or Claremont or Rose Prairie or Montney, all of us have one thing in common, and that is that the North is our home. So I am asking that you do vote Conservative this election on October 24th, and that you certainly consider voting for myself and our platform that we've been fortunate enough to hear from British Columbians all over the province and be voted on and made passionately right here in British Columbia. So thanks for inviting me, and I look forward to the night.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bolin. So moving forward, I think we're going to try and go a little less formal, and we'll be going by Dan and Trevor, and I'm Cheryl. How does that sound? Good, thank you. All right, so we're going to move into our questions, and as I said, these questions have come primarily through sourcing through our social media channels and our members of our associations, and we've compiled them to put together what I hope is a nice array of different subject matter for each of you to address. The first thing we're going to start with is housing, and we will start with you, Mr. Davies or Dan. And our first question, how will your party ensure a healthy housing mix in Fort St. John surrounding small and rural areas that includes the entire spectrum from community housing, rental, and home ownership? 3 minutes.
Thank you, Cheryl. So the BC Liberals do have a housing plan, and I think one of the big issues is the permitting process, even within municipalities, and we need to make sure that we empower municipalities to use the tools and support municipalities to make sure that they are able to move forward in a timely manner. We hear this, doesn't matter if it's multifamily dwellings or commercial. We hear this over and over again, the struggles of the permitting process. And a lot of that falls on responsibility of the province, dealing with, again, highway issues or other issues. But we need to make sure that we do empower and support the municipality to make sure that there is the resources available for them to build what the community needs. Of course, the province does not necessarily interact directly or supersede what the municipality wants for its own zoning bylaws, but we do play a role and need to be there to support. The other issue that really concerns us is recently this talk about taxing home equity, which is a huge concern for us, and it is something that we are absolutely opposed to when it comes to home ownership. So that is something that we'll definitely be pushing back on if we do see that brought forward in any kind of legislation.
Thank you, Dan. Trevor?
Thank you. So I've been fortunate enough with the City of Fort St. John over the past 3 months to be working on the rental housing and drafts needs study that we've been providing, and we're going to be providing for the province so that we can give them an idea of how real estate and housing, rental and home ownership works in Fort St. John. Affordability is an issue that's across BC, and a lot of people don't realize that it does affect every single community. And one step that needs to be put forward is the fact that we need to find a provincial and a local government connection in order to address the housing issues. And part of that, years ago, we brought a project to Fort St. John that allowed homeowners to only put down $10,000 of a down payment versus the full 5%, and it was a full Genworth-backed program. Now, these programs are readily available to communities and to the province of British Columbia, and the guidelines are very simple. And in order to qualify for these programs, there needs to be a partnership, and there needs to be, whether there be a reduction on enhanced landscaping so that more units can fit onto a property and be able to be sold for a more affordable price. And whether that becomes, or one that we did as well as we tied into a mortgage match program where out of a trust account, we credited the buyers $500 a month toward their mortgage payment, and that went for the course of 5 years. So we've seen huge success with that program. We've seen upwards of 35 families get in on that program, and it made a monster difference in Fort St. John. And in this needs study that we're giving back to the province that we're just finalizing right now is to push the province to deal with municipalities, to deal with crown land, municipal land, and large land banks that a lot of municipalities in the province hold in order to help people see these benefits. Because when we make home ownership affordable, your entire community changes, the entire sense of family changes. And I think, and I've been saying it for a lot of years because of course I've been involved in the real estate industry, there's so many opportunities for us if we come together. And that's the biggest thing, is to bring all those stakeholders and parties to the table, get the conversation flowing in the right direction, and see people benefit. Thank you.
Thank you, Trevor. All right, we'll move on to our next housing question, and this time we'll start with you, Trevor, again. Energy retrofits. During and after our current health crisis, the environmental crisis continues. We see a lot of homeowners spending money on renovations, but not really thinking about energy efficiency. Do you support the creation of more voluntary energy efficiency incentives for people who are planning renovations?
Thank you, Cheryl. Some of the biggest programs we've seen over the years were some of the federal incentives they did as far as changing out furnaces, changing out windows. We live in the cold. There's no getting around that we use more natural gas, we use more hydro than a lot of comparable municipalities and local governments do in this province. So yeah, you know what, we need to ensure that people are adequately keeping up. And it goes so much beyond just the energy upgrades. We've got people that are living in homes that have mold and have issues that they're not able to get under control. And I think that if you look at it in a larger scope and you look at this as the availability to have tax credits towards improving the standards of your home, it's going to help you, it's going to help your children, it's going to ensure that they grow up in a safer environment, in a healthier environment. And you know what, it doesn't need to be an overreaching program. It could be something as simple as, like I said, a tax credit program that allows you to put those funds back in. And you know what, on the flip side, I can also tell you, going back to the last question, people that are going to be able to reinvest those dollars into their home are going to put that money in their pocket. They're going to build equity, they're going to build an investment, their homes are going to be worth more when they go to sell, and that right off the bat sets that family up into the next transition of life. Thank you.
Thank you, Trevor. Did you need the question again, Dan? Or? Nope.
Nope. So certainly a lot of similar points is making sure that we do support, and there are lots of great grants out there already. We need to make sure that those grants are available for people to apply for. And one of the greatest ways that we can obviously curb our energy use is to make sure that we there are programs out there to retrofit our homes, whether we're looking at hot water tanks, windows, and having grants out there to allow people to go out and retrofit their homes. As we are looking at Site C, and we see so much stuff coming on regarding demand for electricity over the next number of years, whether we're electric cars or the oil and gas industry that's electrifying. Generally, we need to find ways that we can spend or use less or consume less when it comes to electricity, as well as our natural gas. And everybody wins in that regard. So it is certainly something that we support as far as retrofitting homes and supporting people doing this.
Thank you. Our next question, housing affordability. Dan, this one is for you to go first. Everyone's interested in housing affordability. The problem is that it's so difficult to get a new supply, which we all know will help address high prices and high rent. The recent Development Approval Process Review report identified several ways for the provincial and local governments to streamline the approval of new housing supply. Will you commit to adopting these measures to fast-track further development?
So the quick answer is yes, absolutely, and up here, as well as if we look at the Lower Mainland where there's big issues. That's one of the biggest issues that we look on the housing affordability problem, is there just isn't enough stock. And it is no different up here, just a smaller scale. So we absolutely support any initiative that can build our supply for the community. So as well as we got to just look at, I think seniors housing as well, I think is something really important, and something that our government, should we form government, is also committed into spending $1 billion on seniors housing commitments over the next 5 years. So housing is, like Trevor said, very complex. When we're looking at individuals, young people, right up to seniors and individuals with special needs. It is a challenge for everybody, and we need to make sure that communities have the tools that they need to move forward and support that best.
Thank you, Dan. Trevor, did you need the question again?
No, I'm good. Thank you. It was interesting. The BC Urban's Mayor's Caucus was formed by 13 of the major cities' mayors throughout British Columbia, and they sent me a question on affordable housing, and it was something that was quite wide throughout those 13 large metropolitan areas, and it didn't differ from our own problems here. And I reference back to an urban housing study that was done, and where I think part of the misconception becomes on affordable housing is when you look at these tiny housing and micro housing that we see that seem to be the catchphrase and all over HGTV, and it gives people a sense that something's being done. Well, you know what? In this study, 92% of about-to-be home buyers were against micro suites. They were against tiny homes. They were against small condos. They were against the concept of it. Their ideal dream is no different than yours and mine when we bought our first home. We need to stop telling people what they should buy and start listening to what they want. And in doing that, and as I mentioned earlier, with partnerships that are available, the sky's the limit. We don't have to stop at what is the catchphrase. We don't have to stop at what is cool on HGTV. We need to be able to provide and allow people to get what they need by building those partnerships. And you know what? I've said it then, and I'm going to say it again. I'll probably say it in 5 years from now, but I hope that we can at some point in time come together and make home ownership available, readily available for every family in British Columbia.
Thank you, Trevor. Now we're going to move on to technology and communications. I'll be starting with you again, Trevor. Will your party, if elected, prioritize shovel-ready last-mile projects in rural and remote areas to improve broadband and cell service for existing residents and provide affordable broadband options to rural residents who don't already have it?
It's a great question. Thank you. Yes, I mean, in the simplest term, yes, we will. There's many communities, and I mean, even this summer, I spent a lot of time up in Fort Nelson and beyond, where there is no cell service, there is no, let alone broadband. You can't even get a bar on your 3G phone. You don't find that anywhere else other than the small municipalities and the small regional areas and regional districts of the north, some in the central, some in the east. It shouldn't be like that. You know what? We should be able to ensure that companies such as TELUS and Shaw and the companies that partner with the infrastructure projects in British Columbia are ready available to provide that. And if it becomes a shovel-ready project, then yes, the government needs to get behind it. I would get behind it. My party would get behind it to ensure that all British Columbians are connected to the information, the technology, and the learning that they need. And especially when we see now under COVID-19, where the options became to homeschool or the options became, send your kids to school. How do you do that without high speed? How do you do that without being able to readily get on that? And we need to ensure that's changed. It's 2020. Let's get with it, and let's get with it right now.
Thank you, Trevor. Dan?
Yeah, thanks, Cheryl. Absolutely, broadband. It was something that the BC Liberal government did prioritize and delivered on a lot of communities, getting broadband out to many of our schools, even locally, out to Presbyterian and a few of the other schools. We now need to expand that. And, we saw cases with COVID-19, as mentioned, education, commerce, even just how each of us now use the internet consistently on every single thing that we do. It is absolutely critical if we are to move even the economy forward. We need to make sure that everybody has access to broadband. Regarding cellular phones, Again, working with the regional district as MLA, getting the Got to Go project up and going, it was good to see that there are some hubs up the highway where people can stop and check the internet. We need a lot more of that in the meantime, but we absolutely have to make sure that everybody has access to high-speed internet, and it is something that's going to be critical, I think, to grow our economy.
Thank you, Dan. So moving forward, we're just going to make sure that both candidates, please try to be specific about your answers in terms of what your parties are bringing to the question and what your parties are doing to accommodate what the questions are asking. This one's a little bit longer, so bear with me for a moment. This is on rural remote development to strengthen communities and the economy. So listen carefully. We'll be starting with Dan on this one. BC owes much of its prosperity to its strong rural economies. In many cases, rural communities are anchored by one industry, which is typically connected to our natural resources. This can leave our rural communities more susceptible to global economic volatility. These communities are always striving to diversify, and to assist in these efforts, we must ensure rural leaders get their fair share of infrastructure investment. These same communities appreciate more than others the importance of a balanced approach because of their natural ecosystems, support their economic ones. By mobilizing rural investment, capital non-urban communities can continue their outsized contribution to BC's GDP. These communities also deserve to have traditional community funding strategies reviewed. That's the precursor to this. Here's our question. Will your government create a Community Economic and Development Investment Fund, CEDIF, type program for BC to enable individuals and corporations within BC communities to pool their capital together and invest in their local entities?
That was a long precursor and a long question as well, yes. So I'll try my best. Absolutely, we need to make sure that we are supporting our businesses here in, very specifically rural and remote communities like up here in the North Peace. We are very blessed to have a diversified economy up here for the most part. We have a fairly strong oil and gas sector, certainly natural gas. We have a fairly strong forestry sector. The ag community as a backbone, is still going. Tourism even. This year, of course, not as much, but as a sector. So I think we are lucky in many senses to have a fairly diversified economy. We have big concern recently. The rural dividend was canceled. That was a program that communities could apply for to help diversify and pat up some of the shoulders to move forward. We have the Fair Share, or formerly the Fair Share, now the Peace River Accord, which is something that is, absolutely beneficial, that government supports, for our community and for the entire region, to make sure that we can put it toward these important infrastructure pieces. So as far as looking at an opportunity to pool and to put those resources from investors to build our economies, to build our communities, it is absolutely something that we need to support. It is something that, we need to look at different structures. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We just need to make sure that we can look at best practices where this is happening, and it is happening, and make sure that we can overlay that format which works best for the North Peace, for Peace Country communities, to make sure that we can support them with that as well.
Thank you, Dan. Trevor, do you need me to repeat?
Oh, no, I wouldn't ask you to do that. You know what? The idea behind the CEDIF, I think, is brilliant. And I think that, one of the posts I'd made on Facebook here about a week ago is I had to go out into Rose Prairie, where, my family's from, and farmed there in the 1930s and 40s, and right up until today, where they still do. And to see that infrastructure falling apart, I instantly pulled over on top of the Montney Hill and I Googled what the GDP that agriculture from this area provides. And at $1.5 billion, for the province, it's an astronomical amount of money. And 82% of everything the province exports comes from here. It comes from the North Peace. It comes from the South Peace. It comes from Peace River area. And you know, at some point in time, the money needs to stop flowing out and the money needs to start flowing in. So I think when we look at the premise behind the CEDIF, it gives the availability to do that, and we can earmark a certain portion of each of these GDPs, you know, and whether that is tourism, whether that's farming, whether that's natural gas, it affects us all, but it grows us all. And you know what, we wouldn't have the lives we have in this region without the diverse economies that we have. Let's ensure that we're building our infrastructure underneath them so that they're not collapsing around us, because right now they're collapsing around us, and I don't want to get to the point where it's too late to fix it. So let's fix it now. Let's reinvest this money. Let's reinvest this money as partners between the province and the municipalities, local governments, and start to really see an outcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Trevor. And sort of a part B to that preamble would be, what would your government develop and negotiate how would your government develop and negotiate adequate and predictable transfers of revenue required to maintain reasonably expected services and amenities in rural and remote communities?
Good, thank you. That was a long one. Hey, two-part, three-part. And it's no different than you know, Dan had mentioned when it comes to the Peace River Accord. Without the funds that the City of Fort St. John and all members of the regional district are able to use annually for infrastructure projects, we'd be in trouble. We'd still be full of gravel roads. The City of Fort St. John earmarks we earmark 95% of those funds into capital infrastructure projects. So if we can do that in the Fort St. John area, and they do it in other municipalities in the regional district as well, they're now doing it in the Northwest with a new Northwest Benefit Agreement there. We need to start looking at the regions. We need to look and go, okay, you know what, here's what this sector brings in from this region, here's the amount of funds that need to go back to that. And that was the premise behind that was created back 30 years ago now, and it shouldn't be any different. It needs to be reinvested. Our jobs need to be secure, our families need to be safe, our infrastructure needs to be at least passable, which right now it barely is, and those funds need to come back into that. It's time to stop putting everything in general revenue and spending it on whatever you want. Let's reinvest in our communities, reinvest in our people, reinvest in our families.
Dan?
Yeah, again, leading off with the previous question as well, and what we've already talked about, and I don't want to beat it to death, but agreements like Fair Share or the Peace River Accord are critical for regions that provide so much to the rest of the province to be able to receive some of that back. One of the things that I'll be focusing on moving forward is to make sure that that's guaranteed, because that is not guaranteed right now, the Peace River Accord. You know, it's a year-by-year agreement. So we need to make sure that those funds are sustainable forever. The other part is, I think is critically important, is partnerships. Partnerships, we've already talked a lot about them, but we need to be engaging the federal government on some of these larger infrastructure projects. Our party has committed to $31 billion over the next 3 years on infrastructure projects. It's the biggest infrastructure investment made in BC history. That's transportation, that's building primary care centers, senior centers, hospitals, and so on. So we need to make sure that we can use that money best for communities where it's needed, and to make sure that we can stretch those dollars out, looking at partnerships with the federal government and other community partners.
Thank you, Dan. All right, now we're going to move quickly and briefly, actually, to taxes. Our first question is from Len Field, and this will be for you, Dan. The carbon tax on natural gas for home heating is steadily increasing and now stands at 110% of the commodity actual gas used cost. In the North Peace, there is no reliable option to heat our homes. What would you do to assist with home heating for seniors and others on fixed income? Please be specific what your party would do.
Yes, thank you. And this is a big concern, and it is a concern that I heard over and over again as the MLA as well. Carbon tax has steadily increased in the last 3 years. It is now at $50 per ton. And one of the big issues we have is not revenue neutral. It is purely a tax grab that the NDP have put in. As one of their 24 new and increased taxes that they've done over the last 3.5 years. So we need to, first of all, commit to rolling it back and to commit to allowing those dollars to be applied for by region as grants to offset some of those costs, because we here in the north do spend much more on our natural gas to heat our homes than someone does in Vancouver. I also think that, or we also think that we need to be looking at some sort of a zone, different zones in the province on this taxation, on carbon tax, to offset where it is colder in the far north versus what it is in the warmer climates.
Thank you, Dan. Trevor?
Thank you. Never been a fan of carbon tax. Still not a fan of carbon tax. Carbon tax should have never, ever been placed on us in British Columbia. And I see it every single day that somebody fuels up, or every single day that somebody pays their heating bill, gets their groceries, pays for something to be delivered to them. It is absolutely not necessary. Science has proven it has not reduced GHGs in British Columbia, and that report just came out in the last 3 weeks, last month. So you know what, I feel people's pain, and I feel it every time I see them gas up, and I know that 9 cents of that liter that they're paying is literally going into nothing. And at this point in time, it is a tax grab. It's 100% a tax grab. So if at some point in time, it was looked upon, the carbon tax needs to be scrapped. There needs to be better ways to go about it. There needs to be an actual GHG reduction plan that does something in the province of British Columbia, because what we've seen so far has not. The only way people are going to get a relief is to get rid of the carbon tax, and that needs to be done.
Thank you, Trevor. All right, along the same lines, would your party support a Made in BC value-added tax to replace the PST?
A Made in BC, I like the wording behind that. To replace the PST?
Yes.
It's a good question. It's a complicated question. I wrote a letter to the Premier back in March and suggested that he looked at some tax relief, including a reduction of PST for different home services, for different energy upgrades, et cetera, so that people could reinvest their money in themselves and reinvest their money in their family, and that fell on deaf ears. The PST is a needed tax in order to ensure that the province has the funds to deliver the services that they do. And whether that's building hospitals or building schools or replacing bridges that we have right now, I am not a favor of more tax. I'm a favor of less tax. I'm not a favor of changing one name in order to give it to another. We have a tax that's there. We have a tax that's there for a long time. We know that tax works in order to move projects forward. Let's reduce taxes, let's trim the government's expenses, let's tighten their belts up, and let's ensure that people can keep money in their jeans. Because right now, when I talk to people all across, not only Fort St. John, but Dawson, Fort Nelson, Hudson Hope, Chetwynd, the story's the same. Is their pockets are lighter, there's more going out, there's more going to the government, and they're in a harder time to pay their rent and to keep up with their utilities. And no family in British Columbia should ever have to choose between paying their gas bill to keep their heat on or paying their hydro bill to keep their lights on. And the continuation of taxes is going to hurt that, not help that.
Thank you, Trevor. Dan, do you need the question again?
Nope, I'm good, thanks. Thanks, Cheryl, and you know, I certainly will agree that we don't need more taxes. In fact, we need to start reducing taxes, and we understand that. That is one of our platform points, is to review the tax structure that is out there right now. We know the PST is a regressive tax. It is a burden on business owners. It is something that we need to be looking at to do different. And I agree, we do need some sort of a sales tax. It helps support a lot of the programs that we all desire, whether we're talking education, schools, roads, it doesn't matter. But we need to look at a different way to do it. One of the things that we will be doing actually as part of a economic boost right now during this time when our economy does need a boost is we're actually going to be eliminating the PST for 1 year with an increase to 3% the following year until our economy recovers. So that is a tax saving that is going to benefit every single person, doesn't matter who you are, that makes a purchase. And it's going to, you know, the whole reason behind that is to generate revenue that's going to be going to businesses. People are going to spend more for business. Right now, we have a threat of 30% of all businesses in BC closing. And we need to make sure that that doesn't happen as the backbone of our communities. If you look at how many small businesses and how many people they support in our communities, it's unbelievable. So we need to make sure that we're doing everything we can to be supporting taxes. But looking at PST, we do need to do it differently, and it'll be something certainly that we're looking forward to.
Thank you, Dan. I'm sure there's going to be more tax questions coming up, but we're going to leave some of that for our online audience. We want to be able to touch on a lot of diverse topics up here. So our next one, we're going to move to Site C. Dan, this one is for you, and the question comes from Ken Boone. If elected, what will you do to have your government publicly release the Milburn report on Site C? And will you commit to terminating Site C if the cost of the dam is greater than the renewable energy alternatives?
So the Site C project is an absolutely critical infrastructure project to British Columbia. We know that we are moving to electrifying our province, whether, again, we're talking electric cars, just generally things are electrifying. Our oil and gas sector is electrifying. We know that we're going to need that power. I have a lot of faith in the hundreds of engineers that are working at Site C. I myself have actually worked on the project in the early days when they were doing a lot of the foundational work there. It is something, though, that I believe that the provincial government, as well as BC Hydro, need more oversight on. We need more oversight to make sure that some of the costs that are overrun, those should not be happening. The minister, Michelle Mungle, at the time, she was very clear when she stated the project was handed over to the NDP on time and on budget, and it has taken a massive turn to now being billions of dollars over budget, and that is something that certainly concerns us all, and we need to make sure that that oversight is in place. We also need to make sure that our local contractors are being paid, and that is something that I've heard. So as far as answering Mr. Boone's question, I do support the project. I think it's an important project. We have invested already billions of dollars in that. I think it would be an absolute disaster if it was reversed. We need, though, to make sure that we are working within the best science of our engineers and make sure that this project is done properly for the benefit of all British Columbians who own the project in the end.
You have a few seconds left. I'll ask you again to reiterate if your government will publicly release the Milburn report on Site C.
Yes.
Thank you. Trevor?
Thank you. I'll start off with that question first. Yes, we would publicly release it. I believe that any documents that pertain to a project such as Site C or any other Crown project should be released to the public, and there should be nothing to hide behind it. Site C is to the point, and it reminds me of when I first ran for council when I was 28 years old, 29 years old, somewhere in there, and we were just building the Pomeroy Sports Centre, and I was doing one of my first interviews to be elected onto council, and they said, you know, if you get elected, will you stop the Pomeroy Sports Centre? At that point in time, we called it the Enterplex. And you get to this point in time where you're that far into a project, you can't base it on today. You need to base it on a finished project. You need to base it on what that can mean 100 years from now. So basing it on today and basing those values on looking at solar or wind or other alternatives, which they're now scrapping in our neighboring province. They just tore down a $13 million solar project in Medicine Hat because it failed not to, or it proved not to work. But we need to finish Site C. We need to ensure that the concerns are addressed. We need to ensure that all information is public, and we need to ensure that people have an understanding of what this project can mean, like I said, 50, 70, 80 years from now. But let's get the project back on track. It is obviously being mismanaged. It is obviously becoming the white elephant that people know. You know, it's up to $12 billion now, and we're going to end up eating that bill. But we need to ensure that we can gain control of the project and get it back on track.
Thank you. So further to that question, how would your party manage the project differently to get it back on track, as the NDP has over the last 3 years, and address the project's ongoing geotechnical problems and rising costs? How specifically would your party address that?
So one thing that when this report first came out and the light came on this this issue that was on the bank. I sent a letter to BC Hydro and copied in the government as well. And my suggestion to them at that point in time was people don't have confidence that a hired engineer from BC Hydro was going to give them the truth and the recommendations that were needed. My recommendation was to hire an absolute independent auditor to come in, look at the geotechnical of it, look at the engineering behind it, and in that same sentence or in that same scope of work, ensure that they could provide the recommendations that are needed to ensure a timely and safe project is done. Because at the end of the day, if something goes wrong with that dam and it was missed, we're held liable for that. Not as government. Our communities are on the river. Our friends and family are there working on it. It literally involves everybody from us all the way through Alberta. And I mean, this needs to ensure that it is not scoffed at. It is not a report that is hidden. It is something that is dealt with right now publicly and openly so that people understand that that's what matters. It's not a project. It's not, you know, the fact that they are way over budget. It's the safety of the project for the entire longevity of it.
Thank you, Trevor. Dan?
Yeah, again, as I mentioned in the last answer, oversight I think is absolutely critical. I've dealt with a few issues at Site C, and you know, often we'll hear BC Hydro say, "Well, that's the prime contractor that did that." I think, you know, it doesn't matter who you talk to up here. It's a BC Hydro project. It's a government of British Columbia project, a project that's owned by the people. And I think we need to make sure that transparency on that project is absolutely of utmost concern on all aspects of it. So it is something that we are certainly aware of. We've been, you know, following it. We have two of my colleagues that are very versed on it and have been asking some hard questions to government over these last couple of years to make sure that, you know, all of these reports that we're getting an opportunity to see them, which, you know, we haven't been as well as opposition. So we need to make sure, again, that there's a transparent process in place to make sure that there is that oversight by government as well as by BC Hydro to hold them accountable. And the accountability is to all of us in the region and all of us as ratepayers in the province of British Columbia.
Thank you. And just one more about Site C. What will your party do to curtail BC Hydro rates going up and increasing with spending that is out of control on the project? Firm cost estimate in place for completing the Site C project. Will the resulting higher rates actually be an incentive for job creation? Dan?
Yeah, we need to make sure that we utilize BCUC as the regulator, as well as it goes back to oversight on our rates. British Columbia, we are blessed with some of the lowest rates in the country when it comes to hydro. Now, that doesn't mean it's a free-for-all. We still need to make sure that things are within reason. Costs are kept in reason. I mean, this is, again, whether we're talking Site C, the Peace Canyon Dam, or WAC Bennett Dam, these are infrastructure projects that are owned by British Columbians. And British Columbians and BC Hydro as a Crown Corporation, our invested piece into it as citizens of British Columbia, that is where the guarantee needs to come from, that we should still remain with these lowest rates in the country. And that is something that I'll be fighting for as well.
Thank you. Trevor?
Thank you. We need to ensure that the BC Utilities Commission is untouched by government. We need to ensure that there is not an influence that is put on them. We need to ensure that their findings and their suggestions are what is used to ensure the protection of ratepayers for BC Hydro, which is, of course, owners of the projects and citizens of British Columbia. You know, I look at some of our neighboring provinces and the vast price differences that they have in hydro, and even the vast options that they have between 3 or 4 providers in different provinces, especially Alberta, for an example. And you know what? We're very fortunate to have BC Hydro. Let's not destroy it. Let's ensure that this project is back on track, back on budget, whatever needs to happen to ensure the safety of its workers and of us in the communities that live alongside the river and everybody in British Columbia. But let's ensure BCUC does their job and are free to do their job without influence.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to something else now. These questions will follow childcare, family, and health. So this one has a little bit of a longer preamble too. Hope you don't mind. Sorry. This question comes from Trina Commandeer. All right, ready? The current childcare fee reduction initiative model does not recognize certified ECE educators operating licensed multi-age family daycares and pay to them the same rate that group daycares receive for both infant, toddler, and preschool age children. I am a licensed and certified ECE, ITE, SNE educator, operating a licensed and provincially regulated multi-age family daycare. I follow all the same rules and guidelines as a group daycare, including daycare insurance. The current provincial funding model is discriminatory and undervalues certified ECE educators operating licensed and provincially regulated multi-age family daycares. To clarify, licensed family daycares can be operated by any persons from the community not certified or trained whatsoever in early childhood education field. Only licensed and certified ECE educators can operate a licensed multi-age family daycare, which should place them under the same funding category as group daycare and licensed preschools within the CCFR program. It is discriminatory that licensed multi-age family daycares are categorized the same as family daycares when we are not the same. I am advocating for equal program pay rates in the current CCFR model to reflect the trained and certified ECE educators operating multi-age family daycares. My question is, and this question will be for Trevor. The question is, will your party balance out discriminatory inequity so licensed multi-age family daycares, not to be confused with licensed family daycares, be issued the same CCFR funding that group daycares receive through CCFR programs?
Thank you.
Complicated,
It is, but the complicated ones are the good ones.
but very valuable.
There should be no providers of our children, no matter what age they are, that feel that they're discriminated against based on a pay model or on a funding model. So yes, I mean, we certainly would look at that. I think part of that needs to be a conversation, though, that involves everybody, so that everybody's at the same page, on the same table, as to what this represents for British Columbia. As far as the fact that she feels that there's discrimination in the rates that she's paid, or the rates that are charged, I think that's wrong, and I think that does need to be addressed. But I think our entire daycare system has been a hot topic, and you know, whether it's daycare, childcare, that needs to be looked at and that needs to be addressed, and it needs to be done so with the voices at the table. I'm tired of governments of the day that will tell you what they think is best for you without actually listening to what needs to be done. And I think when you bring in the professionals and you bring in those that are caring for our children, those are the voices we need to hear in order to make platforms and programs that are going to work for them now and into the future.
Thank you. Dan?
Thanks, Cheryl. And, you know, absolutely, and I think that's something that we need to look at more around the managing of licensing oversight, which I think is extremely important for government to be doing. Level playing field, I think, is critical, and you know, when you have one group over here versus another group paying more, all you start seeing is you know, them taking from you know, from a licensed daycare, bringing them over into their own licensed daycare, and we see a lot of movement. We've already seen a lot of movement and challenges in the local daycare here in Fort St. John. The bigger issue, though, I think, is there isn't enough ECE provider or ECE trained people in our community, and I think that's something that we need to address, is making sure that we get more people trained up, we get more people that are able to fulfill that role. I know that there's many burdens. It is a very highly regulated, almost to its detriment, system. So I think it is something that we need to really, really look at, work with the providers, you know, private and not private, and make sure that British Columbia is delivering daycares the best possible way we can. We have committed to investing $1.1 billion into childcare. Childcare is absolutely critical, again, to getting our economy back going. You know, the ability to get mums and dads out to work is absolutely critical for all of us, and it's something that we need to do right.
Thank you, Dan. Following up with you, Dan, Alberta has a sliding scale wage top-up program for their early childhood educators. Currently, BC has one top-up of $2 an hour, regardless of qualifications. Alberta offers 3 levels of top-up: $2.14, $4.05, and $6.62 per hour, depending on the certification held by their ECE provider. Will the government change this to recognize and acknowledge those different levels of expertise of their certified early childhood educators who have opted into the CCOF program?
I'm not fully familiar with the Alberta program, and again, I think it is something that, as we're looking at reviewing these and the need to review this, we need to be looking at other jurisdictions and looking at best practices, not just in our neighbor, but elsewhere around. These are kids that other people are looking after. We need to make sure that they're qualified and trained, and we do need to make sure that we are paying them accordingly. And I think that is something that we need to be looking at. Again, it's hard to commit, will we do exactly what Alberta is doing? I'm not fully sure of the context that the Alberta example is on, but we need to be looking at what Alberta is doing to make sure that if they are running a program that is much more successful and robust than what British Columbia is doing, we need to be looking at that and maybe adopting some of those practices.
Thank you. Trevor?
Thank you very much. It's leveling the playing field. It's ensuring that our plan in British Columbia is a benefit to our caregivers. It's a benefit to our industry workers. It's a benefit to everybody. It's a benefit to our citizens. And if we've got other provinces that, and as Dan said, that have found better ways of doing this, we need to ensure we investigate that. At some point in time, you need to swallow your pride and understand that there's other ideas that you don't need to reinvent here. We can use that idea. We can adapt it if it works the best. But it all starts with communication. It starts with questions like this in debates in cities like this, where we can get to the bottom of the issues and start to make real change for people.
Thank you. All right, and we'll begin with you again, Trevor. Fort St. John has seen a record number of fatal drug overdoses this year. There is much debate among residents about the potential for a safe injection site in the city. While the Peace region continues to suffer a severe shortage of recovery beds, what is your party's plans to address this crisis in our community and provincially, and how will it address the poison drug supply?
Thanks so much. That's a far longer answer than the time that we're allowed to have, but I can tell you right now that I have a very personal experience with that, and my father was a drug addict for 25 years here in Fort St. John up until his death about 9 years ago, and we need help, we need support, we need the government to partner with communities to ensure that facilities are built in order to treat those that are addicted to them. We need to ensure that when our RCMP arrests a drug dealer in an illegal drug transaction where somebody is going to or could fatally die, that the courts don't let them back out again. Our system is broken. The fact that you've got 32% of existing addicts, once they become sober and clean up, that actually reflect back on the fact that their addiction was caused by mental health, gives you a sense of the fact that we have failed. And communities have been crying for help from the province. Fort St. John has been crying for help from the province for the 12, 13 years that I've been on council. This has been a near and dear issue to my heart. But until we start to ensure that we treat the root cause, we're never going to fix the issues. And if we're never going to fix the issues, it's going to continue to get worse. And right now, it's as bad as we've ever seen it. So let's band together. Let's ensure treatment facilities are ready, available, or at least planned and coming into communities such as Fort St. John where these problems exist. And then let's ensure that when our RCMP are doing their job and getting these guys off the street, that we're after the federal government to ensure that the courts are keeping them off the street, keeping our families safe, keeping our children safe. That's what matters.
Thank you, Trevor. Dan?
Yeah, thank you. I hosted a roundtable on mental health and addictions about a year ago. I had our mental health and addiction critic up. We sat with RCMP, paramedics, the social services locally, and this is a really big issue in the north, and I don't think people know how big it is. And it is something that we need to start looking at. It is a medical issue, and we need to start putting the right pieces in place to get the supports that people need in regards to getting them the help that they need. But it's not just a matter of getting them detox and then sending them on their way. We need complete wraparound supports to get people off of drugs so that they can start leading a regular life. And I think that is something that we've really seen fail lately. We see our present government warehousing people, putting them in hotels and hoping for the best, which has absolutely turned out into a chaos situation of crime and everything else. That is not the right way to manage this. We need to be getting people the help that they need, getting them the full wraparound supports that they need, and getting the supports that, we need more psychiatric nurses and doctors up here. We don't have those in Fort St. John. Right now, if there's an issue, it's Dawson Creek. So we need to make sure that we are supporting that. Another big issue is a private members bill that was introduced by our party just recently. It's called the Safe Care Act, and we see a lot of young people that get addicted to drugs. And again, there's a lot of other issues around mental health, but we can't get them help because there is nothing there enforceable that a parent can do for their own child to get them the help that they need. And the Safe Care Act is a piece of legislation that we would look at passing to make sure that parents have the tools that they can get to get help for their son before they're living on the streets, either here or on East Side Vancouver. We need to get these supports in place, and that is something that I am definitely passionate about.
Thank you, Dan. All right, well, you knew this one was coming sooner or later. We're going to talk a little bit about the Taylor Bridge. It had to happen. All right. Can each of you specifically identify 3 things that your party will do to advocate for the replacement of Taylor Bridge? 3 specific action items. And we are starting with you, Dan.
So 3 specific things, and I guess I'm going to look at what I've done in the last 3.5 years, and some of that will be continued to work on. I have met with the Minister of Transportation, I can't even remember how many times, constantly. In fact, I see the minister walking the hallways in the legislature. I just randomly yell Taylor Bridge at her to make sure that it is always on her mind. Budget debates, every budget debate we've had, the Taylor Bridge is brought up by myself and my colleague in Peace River South. We have written letters. We have written letters to the federal government. We've even written letters to the state of Alaska as well as Yukon to try and get them, because, the Taylor Bridge is a significant piece of infrastructure, not just for us, but it also provides that transportation network to our neighbors to the north. So I've been trying to get as much pressure on our provincial government to move this bridge forward, and happy to say that we have had some movement just recently, public consultation phase, as well as looking at costing for options on that bridge. So continued advocacy with the ministers, continued working with our partners in different levels of government, the federal government, and the other thing is making sure that we need to get, the minister has not come up here in her 3.5 years to see the area. We have been trying, I work with the Rural Roads Task Force, we have been trying to get the Ministry of Transportation up here to see the bridge that has gone from annual maintenance to monthly maintenance to now pretty much bi-weekly maintenance happening on that bridge. And with the amount of commerce that goes back and forth on that bridge, and the important piece that provides for us and like I say, Yukon, Alaska, it is something that must be a priority. And myself and my colleague Mike Bernier have both committed 100% that is the top infrastructure project that both of us will be focusing on going forward.
Thank you, Dan. Trevor?
Thank you very much. I drive that bridge. I drive that bridge 3 days a week, and I have for quite a number of years as I go between the communities in the North Peace and the South Peace. 10 years ago, Gordon Campbell, at the point in time, was the premier and the leader of the BC Liberal Party. And he came up and he sat in the Pomeroy Sports Centre, the Interplex, at that point in time as we were opening it for the special ceremony. And he told us that without a doubt, they would allow a bridge to be put over Site C Dam. And with this bridge being over Site C Dam, it would relieve the pressure on the Taylor Bridge and give them the ability that they needed and the time that they needed in order to replace the Taylor Bridge. And that plan had stayed forward up until such a point in time where myself and others had presented to the Joint Review Committee on Site C, where we found that that plan was completely scrapped. You gotta get them here to look at the bridge. You gotta help them to understand how important that bridge is. And yes, we send a lot of stuff on rail and pipelines and different aspects that we do and air, but at the end of the day, if we can't get in and out of our community safely, including Fort St. John, Fort Nelson, you know, Taylor, Dawson Creek, and the large amount of products coming in should scare people if something were to happen. If you look at COVID and the fact that the grocery store shelves were empty for days and weeks on end, now imagine losing that bridge. Imagine losing the one point that we've got in order to start bringing this cargo in that we don't manufacture ourselves. So, you know, I honestly think if a person sat down and ensured that the government knew how important this was for people's essential services and their lives in Fort St. John, I think we'd be able to pull off a project that we're seeing done in other cities, we're seeing them done in other communities. Why not us? Why not the North Peace? Why so long?
Thank you. Can we take your comments a little bit further, as they almost echo my next question? In terms of the Taylor Bridge, if it was to fall down and the North doesn't have supply for a few days, what would your party do to increase the amount of local processing of ag products to remedy a shortage? Combine that with a COVID broken Taylor Bridge agriculture question. We're going to roll it all into one.
Yeah, no, it's good. Food security has always been an issue, and it is actually in the community plan for Fort St. John as far as one of the major concerns. And that's why, is if we lose one of our direct routes, we would not be able to survive a few days without getting supplies here. And that's just, it's how it is. We don't have the mass storage space or the amount of grocery stores and wholesale stores in order to do that. So we would be looking at our own local ag, but depending on what time of the year that's going to happen, that may not be a shoo-in either. So I would rather not think worst case scenario, and the fact that we don't have the ability to ensure families are fed, and clothed and carrying on their lives. We need to ensure the right thing's done, and we need to ensure that that bridge gets replaced. And we need to stop with the fact that people's livelihoods are at risk, not only on the bridge, but as you mentioned, going into the fact that, you know, we couldn't survive, we couldn't purchase toilet paper for what amount of time with COVID-19. Now imagine that all of your grocery store shelves look like that because we can't get product in.
Not another toilet paper gate.
Yes, all that
Dan?
toilet paper talk, early COVID. You know, so you know, the 100-mile diet we've talked a lot about, you know, supporting farmers, food security is absolutely critical. We are lucky we do have alternate routes through Cecil Lake as well as through Hudson's Hope. But this year, at one time, all three of those roads were down to single-lane traffic due to washouts. So the reality is there is a possibility that this is a big issue, and we need to make sure that we are supporting our farmers. You know, I met with Les Shirtliff here recently in Taylor. He's got a project that he's trying to get off the ground in regards to greenhouses and growing fresh produce year-round. It is those innovative, I think, things that people out there are doing that we need to get behind and support. You know, again, to have these massive greenhouses locally, being able to produce produce year-round here in Fort St. John that we can consume locally is absolutely critical, I think, to supporting our local agriculture, as well as making sure that we do have some food security, as well as generally speaking, and again, we are big on supporting our farmers, whether we're ranchers or grain farmers, making sure that they have the resources they need and the ability to continue farming. And this is one of the things I mentioned earlier. You know, we're really worried where a farmer's unable to, you know, divvy off a piece of their land and give to their son or daughter so that they can have their family there and take over the farm. Our present government doesn't allow for that. And that's a big worry as well, where, you know, we're not going to have farms if we don't have farmers. And that is a big concern we need to make sure we continue to support.
Thank you. We're going to touch on COVID-19. Dan, you're up first. BC's now been in a state of emergency for 30 weeks due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Do you believe the pandemic can be managed without being in a state of emergency after the election? And will your party commit to working with the legislature to do so?
Yeah, you know, and I've had this conversation recently with a number of people around the state of emergency, which was just extended again. Today we had more than 155 cases today, so we're not out of the hot water yet, but I think the question looks at a regional approach. And we've said that numerous times. We said that back in May when we were looking at the schools going back, looking at starting the economy up. I look at Fort Nelson. They've had one case of COVID since February. So when I look at that and I see blanket policies coming out by our public health officer, and again, I think Dr. Henry's done an awful lot of great work. I mean, she is looked at around the world as an expert in this. But I think we need to be looking at a regional approach on how we can kickstart our economy. My worry is the longer we extend a state of emergency, it gives the government some pretty sweeping powers to spend without accountability. We need to make sure, and this is something that we're going to be pushing, we need to make sure that we as legislators can get back into the legislature to do our job. And that job, whether it's opposition or in government, is to make sure that we are holding government account. And that is, I think, one of the biggest things that we need to be doing is getting back to work, looking at a regional approach, and we certainly need to be looking at the state of emergency. When do we cover that? I heard John Horgan talk, a year or more from now. I think we need to start managing it before that.
Thank you. Trevor?
As far as the question of the state of emergency being in effect, it should be ended. It should have been ended some time ago, and the reason it should have been ended is because of the job that Dr. Bonnie Henry did, and the job that British Columbians have done and continue to do. And you know what, I think that this has become what John Horgan thought was his legacy, to turn British Columbia around and to be one of the safest provinces in the country. And this had nothing to do with politics. This had to do with people, and it had to do with people caring for people. And no matter what happens, we don't need to be under a state of emergency for that to occur. And as we've seen businesses reopen and start to employ people again, that's important. We're not going to have the amount of businesses reopen or make it till spring that we would have ever liked to have had. And we've seen it in Alberta right now, in communities like Edmonton and Calgary, where 30% of them are not going to be reopening. The same numbers are being said for communities in British Columbia, and we've seen it here in Fort St. John. They've seen it in Fort Nelson. We've seen it in Dawson Creek. So we need to ensure that the state of emergency is over, that we continue making it about people, not about politics, and enabling people to safely carry on with their lives, ensuring that we're protecting businesses and protecting people.
Thank you. We're going to move to natural resources. I see our time is pushing, and I really want to get to some of our online questions. So I am going to edit down some of our questions here so that we can try and get through the most that we can. Natural resources. Dozens of mills have closed, and thousands of forestry workers have lost their jobs in BC in the last few years. In Fort St. John, we've lost the OSB mill, and there are ongoing concerns about the future mills of Taylor, Dawson Creek, and Chetwynd. What is your party's plan for the province's forestry industry, and how will this prevent further closures, reopen mills, and put BC back on a competitive footing in the forestry market? That's you, Trevor.
Thank you. We have a forestry platform that looks at encouraging, rejuvenating, enhancing, and ensuring that it is brought up to date. Right now, forestry in Alberta is thriving. Their industry is thriving. In British Columbia, when they built the OSB mill here in Fort St. John, the quote of the day was it was the most energy efficient OSB mill in North America, and it would be the last mill standing. Well, you know what? It wasn't. It was one of the first ones to close, and it was the first one to cause us a ton of jobs here in our community, in our region, of people that lived in Fort St. John or Charlie Lake or Beldonald or Taylor, our friends that were forced to either move away or have to get work somewhere else. We need to ensure that our stumpage rates are not done as they're done now, because that's part of the problem that we're seeing with Alberta thriving. Wood prices are the highest they are right now that I've ever seen them. That's going to cause a whole onslaught of complications with housing and with other issues as far as affordability goes. We need to ensure these projects get back on the ground. In a conversation I had with one of the major leaders in Canada as far as processing for wood goes, I asked them why they didn't ship out of the ports that BC has to offer. They looked at me as if I was giving them this big secret that nobody knew about. And I said, you know what? You have the availability to process finished products right here in British Columbia and ship them around the world from our ports. You're missing out on that opportunity, which means we're missing out on that opportunity. We got to get stumpage back on track. We got to stop exporting raw logs. We got to ensure we're finishing product and we're using our ports in order to do that.
Thank you, Trevor. Dan?
Yeah, thanks. And you know, the OSB, the LP OSB locally, absolutely no reason it is shut down right now. I reached out to LP and have talked with them over the last little while. Their biggest concern, again, is doing business in British Columbia. And we hear that, doesn't matter if it's in forestry, oil and gas, whatever the sector is, it's a competitiveness, that piece that is missing. It is hard to do business in British Columbia when in Alberta, their system around and stumpage fees. And, you know, we put forward, I'd mentioned earlier that I did a roundtable here locally a year back, you know, met with Louisiana Pacific, we met with Canfor, we met with the logging industry locally, we met with other elected officials. And some of the things that came up out of that was the stumpage system it doesn't react quick enough to market changes. We have 10,000 workers in British Columbia out of work right now in the forest industry in the last couple of years. We have 45 mills that are either permanently shut down or on a temporary shutdown. You know, we need to do things differently here, and we've put forward a number of recommendations around stumpage fees, around even looking at the carbon tax structure on mills and people in the forest sector, the competitiveness, how we grant permits and what that permitting process looks like. These are all things that we need to make sure that we're looking at. The silviculture piece is another huge piece as well. And looking at value added, we need to do more value added with our lumber industry here, whether we're looking at mass timber beams that we're looking at. Dawson Creek has a siding plant there that switched over. Those are the things that we need to do to make sure that we're using and doing as much with the wood here in Canada before we do anything else with it, like shipping it out. The other final piece, which is a travesty in our opinion, is we are still not settled on a softwood lumber agreement in British Columbia. And it's an absolute disaster that should have been dealt with 3 years ago. The Premier has yet to make a trip to Washington to deal with the softwood lumber agreement. Our Forest Minister, it is absolutely something that needs to be number one. We need to get a softwood lumber agreement if we're going to get British Columbian foresters back to work.
Thank you, Dan. And we'll follow up with this. How are you going to influence your party to attract mineral exploration and development investment to our BC mining, our northern BC mining industry? And what will your party do to attract foreign investment into BC LNG, oil and gas development and advancement?
I think I've mentioned this a few times on different answers, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, but it comes down to competitiveness. British Columbia has lost its competitive edge. We are competing with other jurisdictions, whether we're talking our neighbors in Alberta or Saskatchewan, or our neighbors to the United States. You know, a lot of these jurisdictions, it is much easier to do business there. Now, I'm not saying we need to give up environmental rights. We have some of the best environmental practices in the country on how we do our mineral exploration and resource extraction. We look at a mine. To get a mine permit, you're looking at 10 to 15 years. We need to make sure that we can shorten that up. You know, there are so many levels of bureaucracy, I think, that need to be looked at to improve getting our mines going forward. And oil and gas isn't much different. So when we're looking at companies that are looking to invest, it is hard to attract those investment dollars into a province where there's risk, and a lot more risk than our neighbors next door. So we need to make sure that we are looking at our processes to get environmental certificates done. We need to make sure that those are cleaned up. We need to make sure that we have a tax structure in place that supports the economic growth, and we need to make sure that we have an employee and a workforce trained up and ready to go for when we get those jobs back. And I think once we get those done, we should be seeing some of our resource sector spark up.
Thank you, Dan. Trevor?
Thank you. We need to be champions. At somewhere along the last decade, we've stopped being champions for what we have in northern British Columbia. And whether that's mining, whether that's oil, whether that's gas, whether that's forestry, we need to ensure that we're seen back on the forefront of this. And with that becomes education, and it's about communication. And once we can educate people that we do it better, we do it safer. A year and a half ago, I was fortunate enough to be invited by AltaGas over to their site in Prince Rupert for their opening of their propane facility over there. And I got over there, and there was myself, and there was a couple mayors from neighboring communities, and lots of the project partners that were there. And I asked them, I said, how did you pull this off, right? Like, how did you get away with doing this under the rug? I literally flew in, and as you're coming around on the airplane, you can see this monstrous project being built. And I said to the lady who was sitting beside me, there was a resident of Prince Rupert, I said, what is that facility right there? And she goes, oh, I don't know, I've never even seen that before. And I said, well, I think that's what I'm coming here to see. I think we're coming here to open this. And the reason I tell you that story is that they did it while they were doing the correct amount of communication. They did it with the amount of support that they needed municipally, local governments, First Nations, and the province at that point in time. And they championed for doing it for the right reasons. We need to stop being embarrassed to say words like oil and gas and coal, because you know what? At no point in time in the next 20 years is that going to end. And as much as those that believe it is or hope that it is, it's not. We're not going to transition like that. A world can't change like that. So in the meantime, let's champion for what we have. Let's brag about the fact that we do it better than anybody, and we've done it longer than anybody, and we're going to continue doing it better than anybody for as long as those resources are needed.
Thank you, Trevor. All right, I'm going to give a 5-minute warning to our online media moderators. In 5 minutes, if you guys could approach the microphone with some of the questions that you have received online, assuming you've gotten some. Can I have a thumbs up? Thumbs up, good, excellent. I'm going to ask one more question. We'll have 3 minutes for each of our candidates, and then we'll move to our online questions. I think also when we move to our online questions, we could take the time down to maybe 1:30 so we could get through a few more. Would that be okay, timer? Are you okay with that, candidates? So we could get through a few more on the online forums. All right, here's your last question, and this is for you, Trevor. First, your question. This is from Jason Brown. What are the candidates' views on vote splitting, particularly between the two right-leaning candidates? Should this be something voters consider at the ballot box, or should they simply vote for the candidate who they like best as their best choice?
It's a fantastic question, and I answer that every day. You know what? There is a concern, and I've heard the concern, and we've all heard the concern, that there could be the opportunity of a vote to split because some of our ideas or some of our policies might be the same. But at the end of the day, they're very different parties and they're very different platforms. So people need to use their vote as their voice. And that's what I think is going to happen no matter what goes down in an election. And whether it's federally, provincially, or municipally, you're voting for the platform that you resonate with. You're voting for the person that you feel you could run into the grocery store and ensure that you're able to share your concerns with them and that they're going to do something about it. So people are going to have that concern. They need to understand that their vote is their voice and it's their right to use that. They shouldn't have to be told one way or another to vote for one, to get rid of one, to vote for one, to get rid of one, because that's all we've heard for 30 years. Let's hear something different. Let's hear something about representation. Let's hear something about platforms. Let's hear something about parties. Let's hear something about local engagement, because that's what I think at the end of the day it comes down to.
Thank you. Dan?
Yeah, thank you. And I too have been answering that almost every day as well. So from certainly a different perspective, vote splitting is a very real thing. We just need to look back to 2017. Two ridings. In fact, the Courtney Comox riding, the BC Liberals received 36.7%. The NDP received 37.6%. So basically 0.64% win. BC Conservatives took 7.5%. Not enough to win, but certainly enough to get the NDP to win. And that's the crux of vote splitting. And when we're looking at bigger picture politics, that is something I think that we all need to make sure that we're aware of. Earlier and in other venues, I've talked about the darkest days of the 1990s. In the 1990s, when the NDP took over, they took the BC economy from first to last. And it wasn't until we all united on the right under the BC Liberal Party that we did defeat the NDP in 2001. By the time the NDP took over in 2017, BC's economy had recovered back to number 2 in the country. We are now second last. And I think this is the bigger picture that we need to make sure that we're looking at, to make sure that you can put back a government that is able to make changes, or an opposition that is able to influence changes. And I think that is the important piece that people need to be looking at as well for the future.
Thank you, Dan. I'm going to take one more moment. I'm going to ask you each to do 1 minute. 1 minute. Can you do this? How did you come to the party that you represent, and what part of the platform resonates with you?
Great question. Biggest thing that resonated with me when I first ran was the focus on the economy. The BC Liberals in the 2017 election had a huge dream of LNG, bringing BC's economy to, an amazing strength. Putting people to work, promoting healthcare, promoting education by having these LNG industries up and running. And that was a big thing that drove me as someone who lives up here, someone who's worked in the oil and gas sector, for 20 plus years. The other part is, I understood that the BC Liberals were a right of center party that encompassed everybody on the right. And when I see the what the NDP has done, I mean, I was just starting in the workforce in the 1990s, and it was a pretty challenging time. I didn't want to see that happen again. And so the BC Liberal Party was a strong party up here. We've had some great representatives, Richard Neufeld, Pat Pym, and others before that have really done a lot for our riding to make sure that they've done what's best for the people of Peace River North.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Trevor.
I think for me was the ability to create something that represented the North. It was the ability to ensure that I had a say in ensuring the North was not forgotten, it was not taken advantage of, and that promises that were made along the way were able to be brought back to the forefront of what needs to happen for this region and this riding. And you know what, I think that over the course of time, as I've adapted, and the party's adapted with me, that's what I've ensured that our platforms represent. And to resonate with that is resonating that as a local level. It's a true grassroots party. I mean, the Conservative Party of British Columbia is the oldest government and the first government to ever form in BC. And they were gone away for a long time as they tried to rebuild. And we spent the entire part of last year ensuring that we heard from British Columbians and ensuring that they were heard, and that the changes that we were able to make allowed them to have comfort in knowing that this change can be created on a local level. It can just be one guy on a stage or in his truck making changes and listening to people.
Thank you. All right. I'm waiting for my online moderators to be at the microphone to ask questions. Who will be joining us first? Thank you. If you could introduce yourself and read your question. Yeah. And if you have a name, you can share that as well.
Okay.
A name of the person asking the question, not just your name.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Austin Lee with CJDC TV News. Thanks so much for having us here today. I have a question here from Shelley Ouellette. It's for both candidates, and she says, science has made it clear that LNG is not conducive to meeting even the smallest of climate goals. In fact, it will increase BC's GHG and methane emissions substantially, making it impossible for us to meet ours. As dads to young children facing an uncertain future, how do you reconcile promoting an industry that endangers the quality of your children's future?
Thank you. We'll start with you, Trevor.
Thanks so much. I'm a big big proponent of LNG, and I always have been, but I've always been a big proponent of our natural gas industry, and this allows us to take it one step farther. When you look at LNG and you look at the benefits it has globally, we're able to make change right here in Fort St. John that's going to be worldwide. And I think that a lot of people don't realize that sort of fundamental change happens at home. And you know what, I grew up on drilling rigs, and I still spend a lot of time on lease sites. And I understand how the industry works. And the industry has become so much better over the decades that we've spent. And it continues to advance both in technology, cleanliness, safety. And I think that as we go forward, we're going to see that happen exponentially. But I think at the end of the day, the science has shown that with LNG products benefiting other countries, removing that amount of vehicles from the road and that amount of GHGs. There's other ways. If you look at landfills, for an example, landfills equate to 27% of the GHGs. Do you see anybody doing anything about them in the province? They're not. And that's one of the simplest ways we can get rid of that. So when we start to balance it, we don't have to have an economy and give up our environment. We don't have to give up our environment to have an economy. We can have both of these at scale if we start doing the right thing and making the right choices now.
Thank you. Dan?
Yeah, thanks, and I thank Shelley for the question, and I've talked to her on this issue before. You know, Canada is 1.6 of the global carbon emissions. If every single Canadian stopped using fossil fuel today, it would not make one difference on the world, on the global scale. And I think that is where we have, you know, an ability to have an incredible impact on the world, where you look at, you know, China you know, is upwards of 25%. India is almost 20% of the carbon emission countries in the world, based a lot of it on burning thermal coal to create energy. They want our natural gas. And if we are not going to provide it for them, they will get it elsewhere. And elsewhere where, you know, the human rights issues maybe aren't taken care of or being looked at all. This is something I think that Canada can really play a role and have a huge impact on the world scale, to make sure that we can drive down global greenhouse gases, and all along making sure that all of our people are working. And like I say, the LNG industry is something that we fully support and will continue to support.
Thank you. Next, we're going to go to Matt with Alaska Highway News and a question from online.
Hi, thank you. This is a general question here on behalf of seniors, and I'll direct this question to Dan first. In Fort St. John, recent figures show 24 people on a wait list for Peace Villa, at least 3 people in Fort St. John waiting to get into assisted living. Dan, the BC Liberals have promised $1 billion over 5 years in new long-term care facilities. If you're re-elected, what will you do to ensure that Peace River North and Fort St. John gets a slice of that funding for a third house at Peace Villa?
Thanks, Matt. And it is absolutely, I've met with the Sons group here in Fort St. John. They keep me up to date regularly, meet with Margaret Little, who is a fierce advocate. Of course, dear friend Jean Leahy was her predecessor, fought a lot for seniors' concerns. And this is something that we need to continue to push, is to make sure that, you know, if an elderly person wants to have their own place, their own room, we need to make sure that we are able to support that. I think the bigger picture is, and it is something that we also announced with the $1 billion, is the best place right now is for seniors to age at home. Most of them want to age at home, but they need those supports. So we need to make sure that we have staff trained up to do it. We've already offered a $7,000 tax credit that seniors can apply for to offset some of those costs. I think that is what we need to look at, and making sure that we are supporting seniors that want to stay at home as long as they can. At the same time, we also need to be building, and this goes back to even housing, we need to make sure that seniors are looked after, and it is something that I'm definitely going to be fighting for, whether it's in budget at the caucus table if we're in government, or again at the budget debates in the legislature.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Matt. In the housing study that I've been working on, is a report back to the province for the last month and a half. We've asked for accurate numbers so that we can ensure that that is included in this housing study, so that we can ensure that the province has a look at to what we're dealing with in the north. I had a conversation with one of the seniors housing groups here about a week and a half ago because they were unaware of some of the funding that was available to build capital projects. So, you know, it's one thing to have the money, it's another thing to ensure it's readily available and communicated properly. So I think at any point in time over the course of the last 5 years, if the funds that are available were actually brought to the group and shared how that building could be built with that capital, and funding could be made available for support workers and staff workers, I think it's going to be a monster win for a lot of the people in our community that are waiting and have been waiting for a very long time. Thank you.
Thanks, Trevor. So I am noticing the time. We are going to, if it's okay, I know you guys could stay on the hot seat all night, right? You're loving it. We're going to let Matt do one more, and then Laura would like to do one, and then we'll finish with our 2 5-minute closings. I know that puts us over time. Are you both okay with that? You're okay with that? Thank you very much. You can eat tomorrow. All right, thanks. Matt from Alaska Highway News has one more question.
Thank you very much, Cheryl, and I'm going to direct this question to Trevor first, and Dan can respond afterwards. There's been a lot of talk in this election about tax credits, about cutting consumption taxes. Trevor, the BC Conservatives have promised to raise the minimal personal income tax threshold as part of its platform. Can you explain this policy, your idea of raising these thresholds and how that benefits families and individuals? Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. When we rolled out our recovery plan for BC, it was based on ensuring that we didn't go into a farther larger deficit than we're already in. BC and Canada as a whole is in trouble financially. And you know what? It's one thing for people to always say we've balanced the budgets, or for provinces to say we've balanced the budget. But when you've got this gigantic looming deficit that's hiding behind you, that's going to pop up when your grandchildren and great-grandchildren start paying taxes, there's a problem. So we looked hard and we looked deep at things that would immediately affect families. And part of that was ensuring that income threshold was changed, so that low-income and medium-income families were paying less in taxes and ensuring more was left in their pocket, because they're going to spend it at local stores. They're going to spend it in neighboring communities. You know, and it goes along the lines of building our economy, not hiding funds or trying to eliminate PST, for an example. That would be $7 billion of who knows where that money is going to come from. So we wanted to give a realistic approach to help people understand that you don't have to give away funds, or you don't have to start waiving all sorts of taxes in order to help families where it literally will help them the most, and that's what's left in their pocket at the end of the month.
Thank you, Trevor. Dan?
I mean, that is a BC Conservative platform point, but I will talk about the tax piece. You know, one of the things that we've looked at, again, is to review the 24 new and increased taxes that have happened over the last 3.5 years. Personal income tax, obviously, is one of those that's going to be part of that. You know, one of the things that we did, again, a lot of this is going back to supporting small businesses, and I think that is incredibly important as we move forward. And, you know, one of our points that we're looking at is eliminating the small business income tax. Again, another piece to support small business so that they can, in turn, you know, still remain viable with this big looming threat, you know, that we've heard a couple times tonight about, you know, 30% of the businesses shutting down. We need to be there to support people. And again, we have committed to reviewing tax policy in British Columbia, and that's all tax policies, to make sure that we are doing it right. And I don't necessarily think we are, so we need to look at that.
Thank you, Dan. And we'll go to our last online question, and I'm sure there's tons more. So I would just like to say to both of our candidates, you could go to any of the platforms, the media platforms that we've had questions running on, and certainly address a lot of those questions after we leave here this evening. That would be to your benefit. But we will have one more question from Laura at Moose FM.
This question is from Nathaniel Dirks, and he wants to know, what will your party do to ensure road maintenance is completed to an acceptable standard, and how will you deal with contracts that are awarded to contractors who are not able to maintain and repair the roads to an acceptable and safe standard?
Did you hear that? No, I missed the first. It was a little bit muffled, yeah.
Okay.
It was about road maintenance, correct?
Yes. So what will your party do to ensure road maintenance is completed to an acceptable standard, and how will you deal with contracts that are awarded to contractors who are not able to maintain and repair the roads to an acceptable and safe standard?
We'll begin with Dan on this one. Did you hear the question, Dan?
Yeah,
Okay.
I did. Yeah, thank you. I didn't know who it was from, though. I didn't quite. That was kind of muffled, but I'll thank whoever the question came from. This was one of our big concerns when the new contract was recently awarded to Dawson Road Maintenance. Want to thank YRB. I think they did a pretty good service up here. Dawson Road construction. The NDP basically lowered the amount of money that contractors are going to be get, but demanded that they deliver the same amount of service. So when you do that, you can see the end result. It's going to be a hard challenge for any organization to make. So I have been regularly meeting with Dawson. They are trying to get things under their feet. They've been in now for not quite a year, or just coming up on a year. But we need to, should we get in government, I think that is something that we need to be looking at. How the NDP awarded numerous contracts to road maintenance providers around the province. I have concerns. Again, it is something that, it's certainly in one of my top 10, probably goes into the top 5 in the winter, complaints that I receive at my office here in Fort St. John, and it is something that we are constantly working on. So I think we'll need to be looking at some of those contracts and making sure the money is there to make sure our roads are safe.
Thank you, Dan. Trevor?
Thank you so much for the question. 2 parts. One is the amount of money that they have cut out of that budget is certainly affecting us. And no matter what you do, you can't stretch a budget. It doesn't matter what you try to do. But the other is capital, and we're not getting the capital investments in our roads that we need to be. The third part of that is an oversight. And if you're going to send somebody out to Montney or Rose Prairie or Cecil Lake or some of these provincial roads that are out there and they're not being taken care of and they're literally falling out from underneath my Dodge truck, if you don't have somebody inspecting that work, how do you know it's been done? And I think that's the question that he's really asked. So we have Ministry of Transportation staff here. We have the staff that are capable in order to ensure that these projects are signed off of, and to ensure that they're safe, and to ensure that they're going to last a longer time than they're lasting right now. So the correct amount of funds need to be put first into capital to rebuild these roads and fix them right, and then into maintaining them, and not trying to skimp out on a budget because we're in the north, which seems to be what their reason must be.
Thank you, Trevor. And that brings a close to our questions. I appreciate your honesty and your forthrightness answering all the questions. Let's close with our 5-minute closing, and we'll start with you, Trevor.
I've been out of water for about 40 minutes, so I don't think I need a full 5 minutes to close.
I have one here if you need.
No, it's all good. I just wanted to, first off, thank the viewers, thank our media. Thank you again. Thanks to the Lido and Brian, and of course, everybody who's in order to do this, and the BC Northern Real Estate Board as well for funding this. It's events like this that get people aware, and it's events like this that give them the opportunity to feel like their voice matters. And I think that that's fundamental in our society right now, and whether it's local governments, whether it's provincial, or whether it's federal, if you don't get involved and have your say, that's when the change doesn't happen. And that's when you start going, okay, am I good with the way it's always been? Or do we want to mix this up a little bit? Do we want to shake this up a little bit and ensure that our voice are heard, our vote counts, and that we've had our say? On October 24th is an election that none of us expected. It was a snap election that was done solely for John Horgan and the NDP to form a majority government. Parties from all across British Columbia have come together, and they've come together with their different platforms and their different candidates. And I'm extremely proud that we were able to do that, and that I was able to represent Peace River North, my home, and that means a lot to me. But I want to start by telling you that I'm not going to promise the moon and the stars. I'm not going to promise billions of dollars in projects, because that's not how I operate. How I operate is ensuring that our essential services are met, that our taxes are reduced, that people are able to have more money in their pocket, that we're able to work with industry to create jobs. Government should not create jobs. Government should remove the red tape that's needed in order for industry to do that, because when that happens, everybody wins. Communities win, families win, people win. I'm not going to promise you the moon and the stars. I'm going to promise you that I will do whatever it takes to ensure that I'm a champion for this region, and whether it's Fort St. John or Fort Nelson or Hudson Hope, Taylor, or any of our farming communities, which I've spent a ton of time in my 41 years in this area, I will work tirelessly to ensure that you're heard no matter when it is. For those that didn't get their questions heard, My email is leader@bcconservative.ca. You are more than welcome to email me any of your questions, any of your concerns to leader@bcconservative.ca. It's my email on my phone. You're not going to get a party response. You're not going to get somebody else that's replying for me. You're going to get me, and that is as real as it gets. So thank you. Thank everyone. Thanks, Dan, and have a great night.
Thank you, Trevor. Dan.
Great, thanks. Thank you, Cheryl, and thanks again as well, everybody who participated out there in virtual land. I'm not sure what the viewership is tonight, but I'm sure that lots of people are out there watching. Want to thank the Lido again for hosting this, all of our media partners, as well as the Chamber for making this a possibility. Elections are extremely important. The process of getting engaged is extremely important, and I've been so happy to be engaging with lots of young people in this last few weeks that are really getting engaged in politics, and I think that is a great thing to see. This is going to be a very important election for us in British Columbia, especially us up here in northern British Columbia. We have a plan. The BC Liberals have a plan to get our economy back on track. We have a plan to restore confidence in British Columbia. We have a plan to rebuild British Columbia, and we can actually deliver on that promise. And I think on election night, we are counting on British Columbians to send the BC Liberal back into government. Our economy is dependent on it. Our families are dependent on it. And I have met every single candidate that we have running in all 87 of our ridings across the province, and the caliber of these candidates are unbelievable across the province. Unfortunately, we have more than just 22% of the ridings represented. We have an opportunity to form government moving forward and making some positive changes that we can all look forward to. And I just want to quickly recap a few little things that we talked about tonight. And I know I'm short on time, so I'll go quickly. You know, I spoke briefly about the PST going down to 0 for the first year and then up to 3% until the economy recovers. This is a benefit that will benefit every single British Columbian, especially our businesses, especially up here in the North Peace, where we are always competing with Alberta. We are going to keep some of those dollars now in the Peace Country. Supporting seniors. We talked about $1 billion to support seniors, as well as supporting seniors at home. Addiction support. Full wraparound addiction support, and the Safe Care Act. We need to make sure that we are doing something that has positive change on getting people off of drugs. Talked about streamlining the process to get projects moving forward. Doesn't matter if it's forest projects, oil and gas projects. We need to make British Columbia more attractive again. We need to support our agriculture industry. And again, as we've committed to changing Bill 15 and Bill 52 to support farmers, to keep farmers and farmers' families multi-generational, to keep them farming on the land. And I think that is absolutely important. A couple of things we didn't cover that I was hoping to talk about tonight. ICBC. The BC Liberals have committed to opening up competition to ICBC. This is something that I think 80% of British Columbians have come out in favor of, saying we need choice as people that want to buy auto insurance, and that is a commitment that we are making. Wildlife management is another thing that I hope would have come up tonight. We need to make sure that we have sound wildlife management practices in place. This is something that the past government has done, and it's something that the previous governments haven't done very well. We need to make sure that there is a guaranteed funding mechanism in place to support our wildlife, to support our hunters, to support our backcountry users. We need to make sure that we are supporting predator management across the board, and again, supporting science. Looking at science-based decisions is something that's extremely important to us. As you spoke earlier, vote splitting is real. We've seen this in Courtney Comox. We've seen this in Maple Ridge. This is about the big picture, making sure that we are not splitting that vote, making sure that we can send a BC Liberal government back, a free enterprise government that is not associated to the federal Liberals, a government that is there to improve industry, a government that is there to grow the economy, a government that is there for free enterprise market. We need to make sure that we are doing this and moving that forward. So my vision for British Columbia is to provide the best possible life, the best possible future and quality of life for every British Columbian. My philosophy is doing something today that's going to benefit my children. I'm a father of 2 children. What I do today is something that I truly believe in will benefit my kids. And that is kind of where I come from on all of my decisions. I will represent the people of this riding. I will continue to represent the folks of Peace River North with integrity. That is something that I'm proud to say that I've continued to do. I have worked with so many people across this region. I look forward to continue to serving all of you in this riding. And as well, I just want to do a little note. Tomorrow is the opening for advance polls. Please make sure that you take advantage of the advance polls for the next 7 days, but certainly get out and vote. It is fundamental that you get out and vote on October the 24th. Again, check me out on Facebook. I'm easy to find. dan.davies@bcliberals.com. I, too, answer that personally on my phone. I look forward to your support on October 24th. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Dan. Well, I think if we've learned anything tonight, the conversation we've had for the last hour and 45 minutes, though it's overdue, it was clearly the tip of the iceberg. We did not manage to get to a couple of the topics that you did mention, Dan, and they were in a lot of our questions. It's just management of trying to touch on everything. So again, I encourage our candidates to go to the media partners that we have here tonight and follow through with a lot of the questions that are online and continue those conversations. Thank you for mentioning the advanced voting. We have advanced voting happening October 15th to the 21st. And if you're doing mail-in voting, they recommend that you have mailed it in by October 17th. It must be received by 8 p.m. on October 24th. And polling stations, of course, are at the electoral offices around town. Please check your local, your closest location to vote in person on October 24th. I want to thank both of our candidates, Trevor Bolin with the Conservative Party, Dan Davies with the Liberal Party. Thank you very much for being here and sharing your opinions, your platforms, and your parties with us. And I again want to quickly thank our partners, the Lido, Moose FM, Alaska Highway News, CJDC TV, the BC Real Estate Board, and us at the Fort St. John and District Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for joining us tonight and have a great evening.